Hello and welcome to Legacy IAS Academy. तो आज के इस वीडियो में we will be covering about some of the recent plane crashes that has taken place of late. एक तो अजरबैजान की एक प्लेन थी जो रशिया जा रही थी and in this transaction it met with an accident. इसमें totally 66 passengers travel कर रहे थे. 66 people were traveling and out of them 38 have died. But the second one, in which South Korea, there was a plane accident which took place in South Korea. The plane was landing and the landing gear failed to open. ठीक है? और this led to death of almost all the passengers bearing very few. Death of almost all the passengers bearing very few. So the last week, I should say, was a very saddening week for civil aviation. Civil aviation की accidents इतने common नहीं है. This is not very common. But the last two accidents has shook the world कि we are not able to ensure कि अगर मान लेते the safety of the current civil flights, the planes is not sufficient enough that in case of any mishap, any issue, we do not have sufficient techniques that we will be able to ensure the survival rates, increase the overall survival rates. ठीक है? But here we are going to analyze some of the statistics. So, कुछ data analyze करना चाह रहे हैं कि किस कंडीशन में हम लोग सर्वाइवल रेट को इंक्रीज कर सकते हैं. व्हाट इज द ओवरऑल चांसेस दैट मैक्सिमम नंबर ऑफ सर्वाइवल्स कैन बी टेकन आउट ऑफ द प्लेन. ठीक है? सो गोइंग बाय स्टैटिस्टिक्स, in the last two plane crashes what we have seen that majority of the survivors were coming out from the tail end, from the rear end of the plane. ठीक है? So it says that there are relatively higher chances that people who are sitting at the back end of the plane, close to the tail, have a higher survival rate. Okay? If we go by statistics, so the fatality rate is minimum, close to minimum at the rear end of the plane. Okay? This is 32%. In the middle of the plane, it is 39%, but in front it is. So by statistics, if somebody is sitting at the front end of the row, there is a 38% fatality rate. ठीक है? Talking about the middle of the row, it is 39%, and at the rear end, if we go by rows, so this is 32% and this is the minimum. That is why in these two plane crashes, what we have observed, that majority of the survivors were coming from the rear end of the plane. ठीक है? Secondly, 22%. This is the highest survival rate or minimum fatality rate, I should say. 22% who are in the middle seat of the rear end. At the rear end also, if you are sitting in the middle seat, the fatality rate is minimum in the entire crew, in the entire crew cabin. Okay? This is 22%. But there is a knack to this, that all of this is conditional. This is what is coming from various surveys. But as the Time magazine has surveyed that there is absolutely no condition, no method of calculating which seat is more dangerous and which seat is less dangerous, or where in case of accidents, from which portion we will be able to get the survivors, from which portion we will not be able to get the survivors. There is absolutely no method to calculate this statistically, because it definitely depends upon what kind of plane crash that aircraft has met with. For example, there can be certain crashes wherein the tail itself has touched the ground. There can be certain crashes wherein the belly has touched ground, or in fact there can be certain crashes wherein the front end of the plane itself has met the crash. So it cannot be clearly said. If the tail has met the crash, the opposite end of the tail will have a greater survival rate. If the front end has met the crash, the rear end people will have a greater chance of survival. If the rear has met with a crash, the front end will have a greater survival. So this is absolutely conditional on what kind of accident the aircraft has met with, that ultimately helps us decipher what will be the highest rate of survival. But we should also be remembering this fact that the current techniques are not sufficient enough to increase the overall survival rates of the people who are traveling inside the plane. ठीक है? This is some method of we are trying to devise how to find out where, if the people come, if the plane is about to meet an accident, people get accumulated in this area, we will be able to overall increase the survival rate. ठीक है? So with that, we come to the end of this topic. I wish you all the very best. If you have any doubt, please do let us know in the comment section below. Thank you so much.